we are playing for keeps. It is a battle over keeping our country, which means to continue to build our country, or tearing our country down completely.
Yes, and that includes our freedom of expression and First Amendment rights, Mikey boy.
At one point, the media accused him of maybe having Parkinson's disease. Trump jokes about this, goes on a several-minute-long rant, basically a stand-up comedy bit, about how when you're drinking water, it's a good idea not to spill it on your silk necktie.
Don't care.
You had on a very good red tie.
No one cares about this.
It's silk because they look better. They have a better sheen to them.
Can we please move on?
Get water on the tie. And I don't want to drink much. So I lifted up the water. I see we have a little glass of water. Where the hell did this water come from?
I said let's move on.
So he takes a sip of the water, then he throws the water to the side. President Trump sips the water, and then he throws it off the stage.
Yeesh, I still remember fondly back of when that Marco Rubio took a brief sip of water during one of his speeches and the media got on his ass for it. And now, fast forward to 2020, we have Mike Knowles sucking Trump's dick over sipping water. Now, y'all might be wondering why I'm responding to a right-winger this time. Well, for one, because it's Michael Knowles, and some of you might know that I'm really not too fond of the guy. Also because I've been seeing more and more people within the recent 1 to 2 years advocate for unironically burning the American flag with memes and videos advocating for it being shared by some of my friends around on Facebook. And let me put the disclaimer that I hate flag burning about as much as the next patriot does, and would probably consider unfriending somebody from my life if they really had that much visceral hatred for the United States that they're essentially expressing right there if they did such a thing. But that said, as a conservative libertarian, I fully recognize that it is a form of expression to be burning a flag, and it would fall under the First Amendment and just the general principle of freedom of expression, and if they attained ownership of that singular flag via legitimate means, it is their right to do whatever they want with their privately owned property. In this case being the American flag they bought or were given. So under both private property rights and freedom of expression, it would be highly unethical to ban such an albeit questionable practice. But to respond to some of the I guess sophisticated arguments for banning flag burning, we're going to use Mr. Michael Mitt Romney haircut Knowles as a foil for such a video. Take it away, Mikey boy.
He then moves on to more ideological questions. And this question, I think, shows a major debate that's going on the right now between the old, kind of more libertarian consensus and the new, more conservative, traditional idea that's emerging.
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I always thought and still do think that it was the old guard right wing that was the more conservative type, and that's the new guard right wing that's actually the more libertarian-esque type, especially when it comes to LGBT rights and drug rights and that other stuff.
And this is on the question of flag burning, as President Trump echoed a sentiment he's mentioned before, sentiment that I have supported on this show, which is we ought to have laws, or a constitutional amendment, I suppose, in this country, against burning the American flag.
Congratulations on aligning yourself more with the likes of Saudi Arabia, you authoritarian prick.
We ought to come up with legislation that if you burn the American flag, you go to jail for 1 year.
You know, I don't know if I can defend Trump from accusations of fascism anymore. I mean, sure, he's not the worst that fascism gets, but all the same, I don't know if I can defend him at this point.
1 year.
Take a look at all the clapping seals just lapping it up, everyone. Now, that's not to say that I think that even near close to all Trump supporters are a bunch of authoritarian sympathizers, but all the same, this just goes to show that this idea is sadly enough catching on with people.
This is a great idea. I know that some conservatives are going to shrink back instinctively.
And rightly so, too.
Like if you're at a doctor's office and he hits the hammer on your knee and the knee goes up, you're going to shrink back at that because we support free speech.
Exactly, dumbass, so that should be the end of the conversation.
So you can't be for a flag burning, anti-flag burning amendment, right?
Right.
Wrong.
Dickhead.
Not quite. What's the issue here? The issue is the debate. Are conservatives going to get serious, or are we going to let the left run roughshod over the country?
Dude, get your head out of your ass. You're just going to end up creating more leftists with all this inconsistency of your principles. Just in the same way that SJWs with their inconsistency with their principles on racism ended up creating all these very vocal alt-righters and other types of white identitarians, for fuck's sake.
For a long time in this country, for most of our nation's history, we've had laws against burning the flag.
Citation needed.
For a lot longer than we haven't had laws against burning the flag. This was just part of our nation. Then this was challenged in recent decades, and it was found to be unconstitutional to have a law against burning the American flag.
If I was to give the benefit of the doubt to Michael that he's actually correct on his interpretation of history, I think that this is actually one of the rare times that SCOTUS was actually in the right. Now, do I think that they were doing it for the sake of being consistent with free speech and the First Amendment? Possibly not. Were they actually doing it underhandedly for the sake of a leftist agenda and ultimately making the country more left-leaning? Probably, but all the same.
And actually, Antonin Scalia, the great originalist justice, was one of the people who opposed, who found that it was unconstitutional to have an amendment or a law against burning the American flag.
Well, except for Scalia, apparently.
It's incoherent to burn the American flag and to do so in the name of the First Amendment.
You got it all wrong, you overpaid sophist. Flag burners aren't burning the American flag in the name of the First Amendment. They're burning the American flag in the name of hatred towards America, basically. It's us conservatarians who are defending their right to do so in the name of the First Amendment. And no, it's not incoherent, it's consistent is what it is. So take your whole "it's incoherent" line and shove it up your ass.
Because the American flag is the symbol of the whole country. The country, which includes in it the First Amendment. If you burn the American flag, you are burning symbolically the First Amendment. And so it's an act that doesn't make any sense.
What the fuck are you on? You sound like you're bordering on a straw man right there. None of us conservatarians are defending the act itself of burning the American flag. I agree, it's stupid, it's incoherent, I don't want them to do it. I just realize it's not my right to dictate to them what they're to do with their speech. And guess what, Mike? People use their rights in incoherent ways all the freaking time. And it is, ironically enough, a person's free speech rights to be hating on and speaking against the principle of free speech.
Moreover, I think of it in the way that G.K. Chesterton talked about how there is a thought that stops thought. And that is the only thought that ought to be stopped.
Ah, great. Now we're engaging in thought policing. As if you couldn't have sounded worse, Mikey boy. Thought by itself does not stop thought. It is action that stops thought and ideas from spreading and whatnot. And those are the things that we should really be concerning ourselves, not what people are just merely keeping to themselves as far as thoughts and opinions go.
There is free expression that stops free expression. And that is the only free expression that ought to be stopped by the lights of the First Amendment. That would be something like burning a flag.
I also want to add that you can be an American hater and also be pro-free speech at the same time. So merely just burning the American flag does not at all in of itself prohibit or even condemn someone else's free speech.
Another reason is that nations need to have things that hold them together.
I agree. Something like, I don't know, principles, one of them being free speech, and you know, principles ain't really principles when you're being freaking hypocritical about them!
Another reason this is a great idea and why it's actually conservative to have an amendment, constitutional amendment, against burning the American flag, is that the conservative worldview needs to have not just form, but substance. It needs to have not just procedure, but actual stuff.
Isn't private property rights and gun rights, just as two examples, quote-unquote, actual stuff?
So for instance, we support free expression.
Oh yes, and that of course.
But we also need to support specific things to express.
Where the fuck does that even say that that is a prerequisite for somebody to have their free speech rights or for them to stand for free speech?
It can't just be you're free to make any decision you want. Well, what decision are you going to make? It's like the pro-choice people. They say, we're pro-choice. Okay, you're choosing to do what? Really what they mean is they're pro-abortion.
First of all, I'm pro-life myself, but even I can realize that pro-choice and pro-abortion are not necessarily the same thing, but that's a subject in of itself entirely. Secondly, we're not talking about people being allowed to do absolutely whatever action that they want to do, because obviously there are some actions that are unethical and shouldn't be allowed, like I believe abortion to be. But again, we're not talking about actions, we're talking about people being allowed to speak whatever they want, which doesn't harm anyone or anything except maybe their fifis. Stay on subject, Mike.
For the last 50, 60 years, conservatism has more or less just boiled down to procedure. We're going to oppose the certain procedures that are destroying America. But if you use the right procedure to tear down statues, that's a good thing.
Mr. Strawman, give me a break.
I'm pretty sure that I can speak for all of your conservative detractors that we don't find tearing down statues to be a good thing in of itself, jackass.
Or even on the question of immigration. We let in more and more and more immigrants in the country, and there's less and less and less assimilation. We say, okay, well, we can, of course, we would never oppose that left-wing policy.
I think what you meant to say is, of course, we'd never support that left-wing policy for your analogy. This is why you edit your videos, folks, like me.
But you got to do it legally. You got to follow the right procedure, but we're not going to oppose you on the substance.
This is outright bullshit. We do oppose them on the substance, and some of the substance even directly ties in with the procedure, like gun rights, for example. Constitutionally or procedurally, I guess as that's the term you use instead, you can't enact gun control, and we also oppose lefties on gun control because substantively, we stand for the principle that all people have a natural right to bear arms at the same time. You got your head so far up your ass that you're able to see what you ate for breakfast yesterday.
Or look at originalism. We've said we need to have these originalist judges. They don't need to have any conservative content, but they need to follow this procedure of interpretive principle. Well, guess what? We've lost virtually every important case over the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, more than that. The procedure is not enough. We need to have substance. We need to stand for something.
Yeah, and one of those somethings is the principle of free speech. And guess what? If you're hypocritical with your principles, you have no principles. On top of that, you won't win people over. That's not to say that this is or should be necessarily the deal breaker on voting for Trump over Biden. And I'll release a video later in the week giving my thoughts of who I'm voting for and why. And I don't even think he'll get a flag burned ban through, thank God. But nonetheless, we need to hold our leaders and even our political commentators' feet to the fire on the substantive issues. And to not be blatant authoritarian hypocrites. Hey guys, thanks for watching the full video. As you see, I've got myself a new animated avatar. Tell me what you think of it in the comments down below. Is it better or worse than the Peacoat animated avatar? If you like this content, please give a like. If you would like to see more, subscribe and hit the bell notification button and set it to all. If you really like this content, please consider becoming a patron, as I've finally got my own Patreon page set up, which I'd like to give a big thank you and shout out to my first 3 patrons, Cat Chat, Mikhail the Stray Cat, and longtime friend The Conundrum. I've got a long time requested and anticipated response video to somebody coming up in the near future, and you'll not want to miss out on that one. Hope to see you all later, and as always, God bless.